that the principal role of the government is not to create jobs directly and balloon the civil service, but to provide a conducive macroeconomic environment to facilitate the development of the private sector. The private sector, in turn, is expected to take advantage of such an environment to undertake investments which would contribute to the growth of the economy and the creation of sustainable employment opportunities. Among the strategies to be pursued during the 2017-18 financial year to promote diversified and economic-led growth is the provision of infrastructure such as ICT, electricity and water supply, which are critical enablers for setting up a business. Other critical inputs such as land servicing, as well as residence and work permit, have of late received attention as basic requirements of business operation. And I'll now deal with ICT, Information and Communication Technology. Madam Speaker, in order to deliver on the priority area of developing diversified sources of growth, an efficient information and telecommunication technology ICT infrastructure is needed as a prerequisite for research and business mainstreaming within and outside Botswana. To this end, progress has been made in enhancing the national broadband connectivity through installation of major fiber backbone network around the country. The Ministry of Transport and Communications will also subsidize telecommunication operators in order to connect primary schools with broadband internet at rural areas and underserviced areas as a way of enhancing universal access to ICT. Now start with the schools. Electricity supply. Madam Speaker, besides extending Morupule B with units 5 and 6 and the refurbishment of Morupule A power plant as additional power sources, the use of solar energy has been identified as a potential alternative source of electricity in the country. It is against this background that a comprehensive renewable energy strategy, which is aimed at attracting domestic and foreign investors or investment, is being developed and will be completed by February 2017. Further, government, in collaboration with the German Agency for International Cooperation, is undertaking a green energy feasibility study aimed at providing alternative sources of electricity. Water supply. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, following the construction of the parallel pipeline to the existing line under the North-South Water Carrier Scheme, government will fund the construction of various pipelines, such as the ones connecting Tune Dam to Matatani, Tsitsidwe, and Moletimane, which is expected to be completed in 2018, and the other connecting Kanye Molepule to the North-South Carrier. Other major water projects planned for 2017-18 financial year include the rehabilitation of Shakawe Water Treatment Plant and its connection to Seronga, Gunutsuha, Betsa, and Gudigwa villages. Yeah, Gudigwa villages. All these projects, Madam Speaker, are expected to provide adequate water supply to these villages. Land policy and land services. Madam Speaker, to facilitate better land management, Botswana land policy was approved by Parliament in July 2015. The objectives of this policy are to protect land and promote its allocation through the establishment of an up-to-date land information management system, and to protect land rights of all landholders, as well as to ensure sustainable human settlements. To this end, the implementation of the policy is ongoing, with stakeholders being engaged in order to create a common understanding of the policy. In order to address the challenge of lack of service land, the Ministry of Land Management, Water and Sanitation Services will provide 37,000 plots under ESP, with particular emphasis on design and building of water lines and storm water drainage, upgrading of sewage and water schemes, debushing, graveling, and paving. The ministry, in collaboration with the PPP unit in my ministry, will also engage the private sector to augment and accelerate land servicing. Local economic development. Madam Speaker, the lack of employment opportunities in rural areas results in migration to urban areas. One way of curbing this migration is through the promotion of developments in rural and peri-urban areas. The Local Economic Development Program, which started in 2015, will be intensified with a view to creating sustainable employment using resources available within local communities. In addition, a pilot project to extend property rates to rural areas in order to generate revenues for local economies, for local authorities, is ongoing. The Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development is drafting regulations, Madam Speaker, on extending property rates to rural areas, and these are expected to be implemented during the 2017-2018 financial year. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, following the provisional closure of the BCL mine in October 2016, government has developed a strategy to revitalize the Silibe-Pikwe region, whose main elements are agricultural production and related value chains, tourism and related services, establishing the region as a special economic zone, focusing on renewable energy generation, green technology, and ICT. Meanwhile, short-term interventions have been put in place that are already being implemented, which include the establishment of a SPEDU land bank for potential investors so that they don't spend a lot of time looking for land. To this end, I wish to indicate that aggressive efforts are being made through the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry to attract new investors into Silibe-Pikwe in order to create the much-needed employment opportunities in the township and in the region. I now deal with diversified sources of revenue, having finished dealing with diversified sources of economic growth. Madam Speaker, our relatively narrow revenue base, which is largely confined to mineral and customs and excise revenues, also creates a challenge about the extent to which we can expand the scope of our economic diversification and export-led growth. Customs and excise revenues have of late been fluctuating due to the performance of imports within the SACU region. With mineral revenues declining and those from SACU being volatile, there is therefore an urgent need, Madam Speaker, to diversify our revenue base towards more sustainable and reliable sources. To this end, my ministry is considering proposals by the Taxation Review Committee of how to diversify the government revenue base. These proposals include, among others, adjusting various taxes, levies, permits, licenses, and reviewing some of the expenditures, such as VAT exemptions. They are going to be reviewed. Yes. Madam Speaker, I now move to the second NDP 11 priority area, that of human capital development. Madam Speaker, to facilitate efficiency and effectiveness in the education system, which is instrumental in driving human capital development, there has been a separation of ministerial portfolios, as you know, with the creation of two ministries, of basic education on the one hand, and tertiary education, research, science, and technology on the other. Provision of basic education for Botswana will continue to be guided by the 2015 Education and Training Sector Strategic Plan. In the area of tertiary education, priority during 2017-18 financial year will be on ensuring that there is a direct link between skills development and the needs of the domestic job market. To this end, the Human Resources Development Council has been working on sector plans in this regard, sector plans for agriculture, tourism, mining, and health. The third area, Madam Speaker, priority area is social development. Madam Speaker, in the priority area of social development, the 2017-18 budget provides for achieving the government's objective of eradicating abject poverty by December 2017. Hence, abject poverty possible. Hence, additional packages have been added to the menu of social protection measures, which include the Layers project, fisheries and aquaculture projects, and the Kalahari sand building blocks. Furthermore, efforts are being made to support people living with disabilities, an important gesture, to support people living with disabilities through various programs and schemes, such as specific assistance to graduates living with disabilities to help them find employment within government. The national policy on disability, in the meantime, is being revised.
Order.
Now I turn to sustainable use of natural resources briefly. Madam Speaker, to achieve sustainable development, which entails expanding the economic base without sacrificing environment, the country has been focusing on two broad areas of environmental protection and sustainable management of natural resources. A number of initiatives in these areas were undertaken during NDP 10 and will be continued going forward. A notable initiative is the Wealth Accounting and Valuation of Ecosystem Services program, whose main objective is to take stock of available natural resources and provide economic indicators for their use or depletion. Now, consolidation of good governance and strengthening of national security. Madam Speaker, good governance and observance of the rule of law, I'm afraid, are prerequisites for development in any country, not just Botswana. Hence, the need to continuously reform, invest, improve on national safety and security of the country. In this regard, government will continue to nurture our participatory democracy. Political parties should be interested in this. Government will continue to nurture our participatory democracy by encouraging dialogue among citizens and promoting transparency and accountability in the operations of the public sector. In addition, measures will be undertaken to capacitate our safety and security agencies in order to address the emerging crimes associated with development of the economy, with the development of this economy, because it is developing. Details of programs and projects proposed for the 2017-18 financial year to address the national priority on good governance and national security are provided under the section on development budget, which I will be dealing with later on. The last NDP 11 priority area is monitoring and evaluation. Madam Speaker, government, in collaboration with the World Bank, is developing a national monitoring and evaluation system. The system, which will be implemented during 2017-18 financial year, is expected to assist government to strengthen the processes for the implementation of policies and programs, track the achievement of national development goals, and facilitate evidence-based decision-making in resource allocations. Madam Speaker, I now turn to the review of budgets, and indeed, in due course, I'll be dealing with budget proposals for next financial year. Madam Speaker, the country's fiscal situation has recently been characterized by slow growth in government revenues and increased pressure on expenditures. Slow growth in revenues, but increased pressure on expenditures, partly as a result of the implementation of important programs such as the economic stimulus program. Despite the projected budget deficit for 2017-18 financial year, which I will mention later on, the government is committed, I must emphasize, Madam Speaker, to fiscal sustainability in the medium term. In this regard, government continues to implement measures to curb increase of the wage bill and reduce wastage. In addition, government will tighten controls by prohibiting, among others, awarding of tenders or contracts without proof of availability of funds, signing of lease agreements without budgetary provision, and environments or reallocations of funds to cover over expenditure, overtime allowances, or any expenditure without the approval of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. Review of the 2015-2016 financial year outturn. Madam Speaker, a significant budget. You'll have 16 days of asking. Not now. Madam Speaker, a significant budget deficit of 6.99 billion was recorded in 2015-16, compared to a surplus of 5.34 billion in 2014-15. Total revenues and grants amounted to 47.42 billion, which comprised mainly of 34.88 billion in tax revenue and 12.4 billion in non-tax revenue. As a result of the weak global diamond market conditions during the year, non-tax revenue underperformed by 24.3% due to a lower performance in mineral royalties and dividends. On the other hand, total expenditure and net lending during the same period stood at 54.41 billion, of which 40.41 billion was recurrent expenditure, while 12.77 billion was development expenditure. The balance of 1.23 billion was accounted for by equity injection and the net lending into state-owned enterprises. 2016-17 revised budget estimates, and from there I'll be moving to 2017-18. Madam Speaker, the 2016-17 revised budget shows that total revenues and grants are projected to increase by 7.53 billion from 48.4 billion in the original budget to 55.93 billion. This is mainly due to an increase in mineral revenue of 3.8 billion on